So introduction to the animal kingdom. So we know, according to the biological classification, all the organisms were categorized into 5 kingdoms. Yes, sir. So Monera, Protista, fungi, plantae, and finally Animalia. So these are the 5 kingdom classification that we know. So mostly the Monera, they are the prokaryotic organisms. Prokaryotic unicellular organisms. So what is meaning of prokaryotic and unicellular? There is a cell. The cell is having the DNA, but that DNA is not surrounded with any nuclear membrane. Okay, that means whatever the genetic material is there, it is present directly in the cytoplasm at the center of the cell. It is not covered up with any nuclear membrane. Okay, so you can say the DNA is naked. You can say it's a naked DNA. It is not surrounded with any nuclear membrane. So those cells are called as prokaryotic cells. And in these cells, only the ribosomes are present and no other cell organelles are present. Okay, so you can say there is no membrane bound cell organelles. Understood? So these two things you need to understand. What is prokaryotic cell? It is containing the DNA and it is not surrounded with any nuclear membrane, and it is having the cell organelles. Those cell organelles are not surrounded with any membrane. So such kind of cell, we called it as the prokaryotic cell. And there is a other kind of cell where the DNA is surrounded with a nuclear membrane. So this is the DNA and it is surrounded with another kind of membrane. We call it as the nuclear membrane. And the cell is covered up with a cell membrane. The cell is having the or membrane bound organelles. There are different kinds of organelles are present. All those, the advanced kind of cell, we call it as eukaryotic cell. So we can say the first formed cell is the prokaryotic cell. Okay, so there is a prokaryotic cell with the DNA in the cytoplasm, not in the nucleus. And this prokaryotic cell, a small cell has entered into a big cell. Whatever the prokaryotic cell is there, it is a small cell. That small cell entered into a big prokaryotic cell. Okay, so it entered into a big prokaryotic cell. Over a time, the cell became the part of the cell. Okay, so whatever the small cell is there here, the small cell has entered into the big cell and it become the part of that big cell. What it has to do when it has entered into this, it has to digest the small cell, but it didn't do the digestion. Instead, it kept live and it showed the symbiotic relationship. That's how this small cell, which entered into the big cell, it became the cell organelle. Understood what I'm saying? So there is a small prokaryotic cell that entered into the big prokaryotic cell and it became part of the cell. So that's how it has turned over a time in the course of evolution into a cell organelle. That's why these cell organelles, we call it as the membrane bound organelles, because this is also a cell which contains the membrane, but that become the part of the cell now. So it is no more a cell, it is an organelle, which is sub part of this big cell. Understood? So like that, mitochondria, chloroplast, all these cells have originated. So that's how a prokaryotic cell is turned out to be an eukaryotic cell. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Sharon, any doubts?
No, sir.
So from the prokaryotic cell, we got the eukaryotic cells. Protista, fungi, plantae, animalia, these are all eukaryotic cells. Okay, only the Monera is prokaryotic, but Protista, fungi, plantae, animalia, all these are eukaryotic cells. And they are, in that Protista is unicellular, fungi, plantae, animalia, they are multicellular. And if you see fungi, it is only multicellular. It doesn't have any cell. It doesn't have any organs or tissues. Okay, so remember this. So here Monera, it is unicellular, Protista, unicellular eukaryotic, fungi, multicellular, but tissue level of organization is absent. Plantae and Animalia, they show the tissue, organ system level of organization. So in that, we'll be studying about the Animalia kingdom, and then we'll study about the plant kingdom, and then at some point, we'll also study all the five kingdoms. That's a biological classification. That we'll do it later. Okay? Because that chapter only gets a two questions. But we'll do it at the later. Okay, let's see the characteristics of an animal. So what is the type of cell we see here? We see here the eukaryotic cell here. Okay. So what is meaning of eukaryotic cell? The animal cells that have well-developed nuclear membrane. Okay. So it is having well-developed nuclear membrane, and it also have the membrane bound organelles. So that kind of cells, we call it as the eukaryotic cells. Remember, okay? And it is a multicellular. You can see in the animals, there are many cells are present. And coming to the nutrition, animals do they have a chloroplast in them? Animal cells? Is there any chloroplast in the animal cells?
No, sir, because it's a plant pigment, right? It has chlorophyll and all this.
Yeah. So the animals, they depend on the other organisms for food because they do not have the chloroplast. They cannot prepare their own food. Okay. So just remember the organisms that depend on others for food, we call it as the heterotrophic nutrition. Understood? So what is heterotrophic nutrition? Animals depend on the other organisms for food. They do not have the capability to prepare their own food. So such organisms are called heterotrophic nutritions. So remember, they are classified into two types. So depend on others for food. They cannot prepare their own food. So they are classified into two types. One is the holozoic and parasitic. What is meaning of holozoic? Ridula, what is meaning of holozoic?
They obtain their food from plants.
Pardon?
They obtain their food from other organisms like plants.
Yeah, of course. That's why they are called as heterotrophic nutrition because they cannot prepare their own food. But what is holozoic?
Oh, like okay. So yeah, they take a solid or liquid food and then they're going to process it inside their bodies.
Yes. So holozoic means it is a kind of nutrition where the organisms will directly take the organic matter, okay, and take it into the mouth and digest that food and absorb the nutrition from that. So such kind of nutrition, we call it as the holozoic nutrition, okay, where you will be seeing the ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation, and digestion. Okay, so we'll see what are those. And there is another kind of nutrition that they obtain from the outside, which is parasitic. So what they do here, they feed on the living organisms and they cause the disease to the other organisms. Okay, so they just not only take the food from the other sources, but they also cause the disease to the other organisms. So they are parasitic. We'll be seeing what are the different organisms that will cause the holozoic and what are the other organisms that will cause disease. That's a parasitic, we'll see. Okay. So coming to holozoic, it is of five kinds of digestion will be seen here. Okay. So first of all, the holozoic means there are five factors. One is the ingestion. That means you take the food through the help of mouth. Okay. Food is taken through the mouth, and that food from the mouth, it goes into the stomach through the alimentary canal. It goes to the stomach and the small intestine where the food will be digested. That means whatever the big complex organic molecules are there, it will break down into small simple sugars. Okay, so that's called as the digestion, breaking down complex organic food into very simple form, and then it will pass whatever the digested food is there, now it has to absorb into the blood. So this is the blood vessel in which we have the blood. So whatever the food that is digested, now it will be absorbed into the blood. So that's called the absorption. Once it is absorbed into the blood, now it has to supply to different organs. Like it has to go to the stomach, it has to go to the intestine, it has to go to the lungs. So there are different organs are there. It has to supply to all. That we called it as assimilation. So that means whatever the digested food is there, it has to send to different cells so that all these cells will get the energy. So once this is done, whatever the waste that is left over and undigested food, now it has to send out of the body. That is called egestion. So removal of the undigested food from the body, we call it as egestion. Is that clear? So these are the different things that you will be seeing in the holozoic nutrition. Any doubts so far?
No doubt, sir.
Perfect. Sharon, what about you?
Understood, sir.
Why you are not opening mouth?
Sir, said yes, sir.
Okay. Please say it louder.
Okay.
Reproduction. So most of the organisms will be undergoing sexual reproduction. What is meaning of sexual reproduction? What is meaning of sexual reproduction?
There will be male and female gametes formation, and then it's not. It will not produce single type of offspring. There will be variation because it's sexual.
Yes. Yes, Sharon.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what is a sexual reproduction? It involves the fusion of the gametes. Okay. So just remember sexual reproduction means it involves the fusion of gametes. Okay. That fusion of gametes will result in formation of the zygote. Okay. Here the fusion of gametes are haploid in nature. Remember, that means they only contain one set of chromosomes. Now, there is a sperm and there is a ovum which will join together and result in formation of a zygote that will contain the diploid chromosomes. Okay, it will be containing two sets of chromosomes. So, which is diploid in nature. Now, this thing, whatever the zygote is formed, it will undergo repeated mitosis and result in formation of the baby. Okay, so you can say from the zygote, now it will form the embryo. The embryo will follow certain stages and finally form the organism, full organism. Okay, so this kind of reproduction, we call it as the sexual reproduction. Next one, there are approximately 8.7 million cells are there. Okay, sorry, there are approximately 8.7 million species of animals across the globe. Okay, so and if there are 8.7, is it easy to study all these organisms individually? If there are 8.7, even if I study some thousands of species in a single day, still I can't able to achieve this. Then how can we study all these organisms? That can be done only the possible way is when you classify them into the groups. And you can study all these different groups together. Okay, that means whatever all the organisms are there, I'll first group them and then I'll study general characteristics of each group. So that way I can study different organisms. But if I want to study individual organism, it won't be possible. So for that, we have the system of classification. So initially there is a different system of classification is there. That is the oldest system where you will be classifying the organisms based on their behavior. Okay, like whether the organisms are domestic, that you can pet these organisms, whether these organisms are wild animals, whether these are creeping on the soil, so creeping animals, are they have the capability to fly, so flying organisms or flying animals, whether they can swim, sea animals. So these are different organisms that are classified into initially 5: domestic, wild, creeping, flying, and sea animals. But that is very limited way of seeing the animals. So later it was given classification. The Aristotle has given this kind of classification where he classified based on the habitat and the red blood cells. So habitat, whether they live in the air, whether they live in the water, whether they live in the land. Dweller means those organisms which will make an home in that place. Okay. The organisms which make their home in land, the organisms which live in the water, the organisms which live in the air. So that's the air dwellers, water dwellers, and land dwellers. And based on whether the red blood cells, the organisms contain the red blood cells or not, they are classified into 2 types. With red blood cells, we call it as enema. Okay, examples like we, human beings, mammals, lizards, birds, fishes. And those organisms which do not have the red blood cells, they are enema. Okay, so example like soft-bodied organisms, hard-bodied organisms. Their outermost is soft or hard. If it is hard, they have the exoskeleton, that is insects, and those organisms like do contain the shell or no shells, that is shellfish and jellyfish. Those soft-bodied which contains the shell, it's shellfish. Which do not contain the cells, it's a jellyfish. Understood? So this is the Aristotle system of classification. And later we got the modern system of classification. If you see, Aristotle haven't taken many factors here. So this is also very limited classification. So in order to study in detail, we have the basis of classification, which is having many different factors. For suppose levels of organization, whether the organism is cellular level or multicellular or tissue level or organ level, organ system level. So you will be seeing the levels of organization. And there is a coelom, whether the body, whether the organism do have the body cavity or not. Okay. Coelom means it's a body cavity. Do these organisms contain the body cavity or not? Symmetry, that means the radial symmetry, bilateral symmetry, asymmetry, whether the body you can divide into 2 equal halves or not. So we'll be seeing that. And segmentation, the body is separated into different segments. Germ layer organisms, that's a diploblastic organisms where they are having ectoderm, endoderm, mesoderm, different layers of embryo. And notochord, the nerve cord which is running either the dorsal side or ventral side. Based on that, the organisms were classified. Understood? So these are the different factors in which the modern classification is included. Level of organization, coelom, symmetry, segmentation, germ layer organization, finally the notochord. Okay, so let's see what is the level of organization. First of all, even though all the animals are multicellular, we know animal kingdom contains the multicellular, their cells can be organized into tissue or organ or organ system. Okay, so based on that, there is a different levels of organization as there. Some are just multicellular level of organization. Some are tissue level of organization. Okay, some are organ system of level of organization. Some are organ system level of organization. So based on that, animals are classified into different types. First, suppose let's see the cellular level of organization. So in this, animals like the sponges, you can take animals such as these sponges, where the cells, there are multicellular, okay, all these cells aggregate together and form the cellular level of organization. Okay, but they didn't form into the tissues, only it just left with the multicellular. Understood? Just remember, sponges where the cells will be aggregated, but they are not formed into a tissue. Okay, so they do not formed into tissue, but they just aggregated together and perform different functions. So that kind of level of organization is seen in the sponges. Okay, so remember, these are lower animals like sponges where only they have multicellular but no tissue level. Next, we have a tissue level of organization. So what happened here? Whatever the cells, okay, first of all, how the classification has evolved, how the organisms have evolved. First, suppose there is a only single cell is there, unicellular. If you see this single cell, it is performing many functions. It is doing the digestion. It is defending the body. It is excreting. It is also responding to the external stimuli. And it also able to increase its number. So there is a duplication. Reproduction can happen. Okay. So here the single cell has got the capability to perform different functions. Yes or no? So now tell me, if a single cell do all the functions, can it do the work very efficiently?
No, sir.
No. Yes or no? So if I ask someone to do all the works, he cannot do well. So for that, what we need to do? We need to create each cell that will perform individual function. One will do the excretion, one will do the digestion, one will do the defense, one will respond to the external stimuli, one will helpful for reproduce. So that's how a single cell has developed into the multicellular. Now, if you see, still this guy is performing the entire function of reproduction. This cell is able to perform the entire function of excretion. Can he do very efficiently if he is doing all the work of some particular function? If I give
Compared to a
only
single cell, this will be able to do more efficiently.
yeah, compared to, but can he able to do all the work very efficiently, like super, damn super?
No, because it has to be a system separately.
Yeah, it is very hard to do entire function by himself. Now what he has to do, such kind of this guy, he creates many guys. And all these will do only that one single function. Okay, so what happened here? This guy is having particular shape. He is having particular function. He originated from particular origin. And he is doing only one kind of function. Okay, these are all identical. And they do the same function, the same shape, same origin. So those cells which have the similar shape, similar function, similar origin, they all come together and form the tissue. So all these form the tissue. These kind of cells all will form the tissue and do the same function. So that's how from multicellular, the tissue has originated. From tissue, organs are formed. From organs, organ systems are formed. Okay, so that's how over a course of evolution, there is an advancement has happened. The better improvement has happened from one generation to the other generations. Okay, so cells that perform similar functions are grouped together, they form the tissues. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so example you take here the hydra. Okay, you can also take, first suppose there is a epithelial cells. All these epithelial cells, they together came and formed the epithelial tissue. Actually, this example you can see in the hydra. Okay, so hydra will form the tissue level of organization, whereas sponges, it's only left till the multicellular level of organization. And you can see here, this hydra is containing different cells. For suppose all these are epidermal cells, there is all mesoglea, there is all gastrodermis cells, and there are longitudinal muscle cells are present. So you can see all these will form and together and form the tissue. Okay, so that's a tissue level of organization seen in the hydra. Next one is, I'm not explaining what is the function of each of these gastrodermis cells and all, because when we are specifically talking about the hydra, I'll tell you what is the use of these nidocytes, what is the use of mesoglea, epidermis, gastrodermis. I'll talk there. So next one, I'm just giving introduction to all the things so that when I specifically study about that particular phylum, I'll just simply say it's an organ system level of organization, but I'll not explain what is this all. Understood?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Next one is organ level of organization that you can see in the flatworms. Okay, so what happened here? There is a several tissues. So how the several cells came together and form a tissue, like that there are several tissues, they came together, all these several tissues, they came together and form an organ. So that kind of organization, we call it as organ level of organization. Here, this entire organ will form a specific function. For suppose you take heart, the specific function is pumping of the blood. You take a thymus, the specific function is creating of the blood cells. You take a some other kidney, the specific function is to filtrate the blood. So there is a specific function each organ will do, which is made up of different kinds of tissues. So several organs, they came together, form the organ system, and different organ systems come together will form an entire organism. So see here, single cell that is formed into multicellular, and all these multicellular which are having same function, same origin, they turned into tissues, and different tissues they joined into the organ, and different organs joined together to form the organ system and organism. Okay, so if we see each organ system, first there is a different. For suppose you see humans, humans are having the advanced version of the organ system compared to any other organism. Okay, humans are the ultimate high advanced organisms that contain a particular organ system level of organization. But if you see the same in the grasshopper, they also have the, for suppose if you see the grasshopper, they are also having the organ system level of organization. But if you see a particular system, they are not well advanced. Okay, so based on that, whether the system is fully advanced or it is still evolving, we classify the systems into two types. Okay, every system we can. For suppose if you see the circulatory system, in the grasshoppers, it is not so well developed as compared to as humans. For suppose the circulatory system in grasshopper, you will see open. Whereas in humans, it is very well advanced, that is closed. So what happens in the open system? They do have the heart. This heart pumps the blood, but this blood will open into a cavity, and all the blood will just oozes out into this cavity. Okay, so whatever the blood is coming from the heart, that blood will just open out into this cavity. And there are different organs which exist in this cavity. They bath in this blood. You can take like it's a swimming pool where all the blood will be leaked out into the pool, and all the organs will just bath over there, and they will uptake the nutrition and oxygen. And again, this all blood will be collected back into the heart. So that kind of circulatory system, you call it as the open type of circulatory system. Whereas in the closed circulatory system, you take the humans as the example, the blood will pump and it will send into each organ with the help of a pipe kind of system, a closed system. That is called as closed circulatory system, where each part of the tissue is supplied with the blood with the help of a closed blood vessels. It is not the same in the open circulatory system, where the blood will just oozes out into the cavity, and in that cavity different organs are present, and they bath in that blood and they take the nutrition. So it is not a very efficient way, but this is a very efficient way. Okay, so based on that efficiency, each system is classified into the primitive one and the advanced one. Here the open system is very primitive, that is which is not well advanced, and here it is a advanced. Okay, so open cells and tissues are directly bathed in the blood. Closed blood circulates through a series of closed vessels, where each tissue will get the blood through the help of these vessels. So you can see here, this is all just opens into the cavity. So hemolymph in sinuses surround the organs. Sinuses means the cavities. Okay, and you can see here in humans, all the blood to every part is just supplied with the network of blood vessels. And here, the primitive one and the advanced one, the incomplete digestion and the complete digestion. Okay, so in some organisms, like the digestive system is not very well developed, that we call it as incomplete. Example, you take the flatworms. Okay, so remember the flatworms is a incomplete circulatory system, sorry, incomplete digestive system. Whereas the humans, it is a complete digestive system. What is meaning of incomplete? There is only one opening. That opening acts like the mouth, and it also acts like a anus. So only one opening is there, which acts like both mouth and anus. We call it as the incomplete. Complete, there is a mouth on the anterior region, and there is a anus at the posterior region. So this is anterior mouth, and this is a posterior anus. So there is a two openings, one is acting like mouth and the other one is acting like anus. So that kind of digestive system, we call it as the complete digestive system. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So next one is symmetry. Symmetry based on whether the corresponding side, all the body part shape and relative positions can be divided or not, can be equally distributed or not. For suppose you take these sponges, you take left and right side, these sponges cannot be divided equally. So body cannot be divided into equal identical halves. So that kind is asymmetry. If the body can be divided through any plane, for suppose if I cut this way, if I cut this way, if I cut this way or this way, through any plane, I can divide the body into equal halves. So that is called the radial symmetry. If the body can be divided into equal halves through only one plane, then it is called as bilateral. Here, radial symmetry can be divided into two equal halves through many planes. Whereas in bilateral, it's only one plane. Understood? So example, you can take here the starfish, where the body can be divided into two identical halves through any plane, whereas the goat, can be divided into identical halves through single plane. If I try to cut this way, it cannot divide the body front and back. So that's why it is only through one plane you can split the body into two. Next one is the fertilization. So fertilization, the male gamete and the female gamete will fuse together and result in formation of the zygote, that is known as fertilization. What is fertilization? The gamete, which is haploid, the sperm, which is haploid, they come together and result in formation of a diploid zygote. That is called as fertilization. Okay. And whatever this zygote that is formed, it will undergo multiple cleavages. Remember, here it will undergo multiple cleavages. What is meaning of cleavages? Nothing but the mitosis, cell division. Remember, it is nothing but the cell division. Actually, in this point, the mitosis will happen. Remember, in our body, any cell division is mitosis, except gamete formation. So whatever from the gamete mother cell, whatever the gametes that you are forming, it all happens with the help of meiosis. Except this, all the other cell divisions in our body is mitosis. Only for gamete formation, meiosis will happen. Remaining all the cell division is through mitosis. And finally, this multiple cleavage will form the embryo, and that embryo will implant in the uterus. So during the formation of the embryo, the cells arrange themselves into different layers. So like for suppose the cell is dividing and it will be arranged into different layers. So one is the inner layer, and there is a middle layer, and then finally the outermost layer. So that kind of organization, we call it as the germ layers. Okay. So the outermost layer is called the ectoderm, the middle layer is mesoderm, and the innermost layer is endoderm. Okay. If a cell is having all these three layers, we call it as triploblastic. If the cell is only having the ectoderm and endoderm, but no mesoderm, then we call it as diploblastic. We'll be seeing what is the triploblastic and diploblastic. So see here, all the cells that are originated into three different layers, the outer ectoderm, inner mesoderm, and middle mesoderm, and the innermost layer, that's a endoderm. Okay. So diploblastic organisms and triploblastic organisms. Organisms that only have two germ layers, they are called as the diploblastic organisms. Organisms that have three germ layers, that's endoderm, ectoderm, and mesoderm, all the three layers, then we call it as triploblastic. So in this, what happens? The diploblastic, it doesn't have the mesoderm. There is no mesoderm. But whatever the middle layer is there, it is having certain number of cells that are not well differentiated, that is called as mesoglia. Remember, diploblastic, you are having the ectoderm and you are having the endoderm. But whatever the cells that are present in the middle, it is not well differentiated and they are just present like a group of cells. So that we know as the mesoglia. So you can see here, the cells are not divided well, but there are few cells that are gathered here and there. So that's called mesoglia. Whereas in triploblastic, it's having endoderm, mesoderm, and ectoderm. Understood?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Now what happens here? This particular cell will keep on dividing, and it will form a particular organ. This cell, from this single cell, it keep on dividing and it has the capability to form a certain organ. So from the germ cells, it contains a stem cell. What is stem cell? This cell can divide many times and has the capability to form a tissue or organ. So that's a stem cell. So you take only single cell that can multiply some hundred thousands of times and it can form the organ or tissue. So that's called the stem cells. So all these germ layers will contain these stem cells. So from these stem cells, different organs are formed. So see here, in diploblastic organisms like an hydra, endoderm layer gives rise to the gland cells and the muscle cells. Ectoderm layer will give epithelial cells and cnidocytes. Okay. Whereas in humans, if you see from the endoderm cells, we'll be getting the epidermal cells, that is skin, and we'll be getting the nervous system. So that's the reason nervous system or brain, they are endodermically origin. Endoderm origin. That means whatever the cells in the endoderm, they will divide and form this entire neuron. Whereas the heart cells, red blood cells, bone tissues, they are formed from mesoderm origin. So that's why heart is called the mesodermically origin. It is clearly given in the NCERT. Okay, so mesoderm, where the red blood cells and bone tissues are formed. So the questions, how the questions will come in NEET? They will give the ectoderm and they will give the stomach cells, thyroid cells, bone tissue, and neurons. And they will, or let's say the question will be like stomach cells, thyroid, alveolar, or let's say the neurons, and let's say the heart cells or red blood cells. So in this, which one are mesodermically origin? So you should be able to know which all comes under different tissue layers. Okay, different germ layers. Next one, coelom. If the body cavity present between the alimentary canal and the body wall of the triploblastic organism. Okay, so what does that mean? First, suppose if you see, if you take the human body, so we know there is the center alimentary canal that is running all the body, like it is forming the stomach and it's forming the intestine and all. And there is a outer, our surface of the body. Okay, this is our body wall. And this is the alimentary canal that is running from our mouth to anus. And between this alimentary canal and the body wall, whatever the space is present, it is nothing but the cavity. Okay, so for suppose we have the pulmonary cavity where the heart and lungs were present. We have an abdominal cavity where intestine are present. We have a peritoneal cavity. So there are different cavities were present, which we call it as the coeloms, the body space. Okay, so just remember what is coelom. It is the body cavity present between alimentary canal and the triploblastic, so, and the body wall of the triploblastic organisms. So you can see here only in the triploblastic organisms, you will be seeing the coelom between alimentary canal and the triploblastic organism. Okay, and the body wall. Is that clear what I mean to say?
Yes, sir.
Mridula, any doubts?
No doubts.
Okay. So it is lined by mesoderm on all sides. This is very, very, very important. Okay. If you see the cavity, whatever the space is there, that space should be lined with the mesodermal cells in the germ layer. When you take the germ layer, ectoderm, endoderm, mesoderm, the mesoderm is lining the it is lining, this is the mesoderm, and this mesoderm is lining the cavity. And inside the cavity at the center, we will be having the endoderm. So this will be the endoderm, and this will be the mesoderm. Between this mesoderm and endoderm, you are having the cavity in the germ layers. And all this cavity is completely lined with the mesoderm. So that's what here. It is lined externally by mesoderm on all the sides. That is also very, very important thing you need to remember. The mesoderm is lined, okay, is lining the coelom. And next one. Based on presence or absence of the coelom, we are classifying the coelom into three types. Whether they do not have the coelom at all, that means there is no body cavity at all, they are acoelomates. Example, flatworm. Organisms that have a cavity, but it is not completely lined with the mesoderm. Okay, so that's called the pseudocoelomates. That means the cavity is there, but it is not lined by the mesoderms. So that's called the pseudocoelomates. And finally, the cavity is present and it is lined with the mesoderms. Those are called as coelomates. So this word is very, very important. If it is not lined by the mesoderm, we call it as pseudocoelomates. And if it is lined with the mesoderm, we call it as coelomates. So just remember, no cavity, cavity is present, and it is also lined with a and it is not lined with a mesoderm. Cavity is present and also lined with mesoderm. So no cavity, we call it as acoelomates. Cavity is present, but it is not lined with mesoderm. We call it as coelomates. Cavity is present and it is also lined with the middle germ layer, mesoderm. Then we call it as coelomates. Understood? How the coeloms are classified into three.
Yes, sir.
Understood.
Okay. So you can see here different examples of acoelomates, pseudocoelomates, and coelomates. First one, acoelomates, you remember that's a flatworm. We'll be detailedly talk about this flatworm when we go study about this platform. Okay, right now you just remember acoelomates is a flatworm. No body cavity region between the gut and body wall packed with organs. You can see here, there is a body cavity. Okay, this body cavity, this is the gut cavity, and there will be body cavity. Between this gut cavity and the body cavity, if there is a space is present, then you call it as the coelomates. But here it is not present at all. So that's why it is called as the acoelomates. No body cavity region between gut and body wall. Pseudocoelomates. So if you see the entire coelom should line with a mesoderm like this. But here, whatever the mesoderm is there, it is just present like a agitated cells. That means all the cells come up together and it will present like a group. So that's a mesoderm which is not completely lining. So it's called as the pseudocoelomates. There's ectoderm, and then there is a mesoderm, and then there is a pseudocoelom. Okay. And next one is coelomates, where the body cavity are present. Like you can see the pleural cavity and pericardial cavity. Pleural cavity, lungs are present. Pericardial cavity, heart is present, which together call the thoracic cavity. And there is a diaphragm is present, which separates the thoracic cavity with the abdominal cavity. And there is abdominal cavity is present, and there is a pelvic cavity is present, where the female and male organs are present, sex organs are present. So this is called abdominopelvic cavity. And backside, you are having the dorsal cavity where the spinal cord and the brain is present. The brain region, we call it as the cranial cavity, and the spinal cord region, we call it as the spinal cavity. So what's the use of the function of the coelom? First, it will protect organs from the accidental shocks. So it acts like a cushion. It can absorb the shock. So it acts like a cushion which will absorb shock. Permits changes and shapes and size of the organs. For suppose if some organ is increased in size, it will provide a space for the organ to increase. For suppose if I don't provide a space, what happens? All this organ will bulge out, or it will be under certain pressure. So that I am supplied with so much of space so that this organ can bulge out, or it can relax, or it can extend. when we breathe, our lungs change the shape and size. Yes or no? So suppose when we take air inside our lungs, the lungs will expand so that our chest region will also expand. The same in the urinary bladder. For suppose you are drink so much of water, the urinary bladder will be filled up with urine, so it will stretch up. So it will provide space. But if it is not have the capability and it's surrounded with all the cells, all the layers, and there is no space ability to stretch out, then it will cause the problem. So it has got the capability to stretch out. And segmentation, if the body can be classified into different chambers or not. Okay, so presence or absence of the segment in their body. That means the body is divided into different compartments. So that we call it as segmentation. And in that segmentation, some organs are present here. Okay, so those organs will repeat. For suppose if you take the earthworm, the body is divided into different chambers. Chamber 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, like that. Okay. And whatever the organs that are present in the fourth chamber, they are also present on the seventh chamber. That means the organs were repeated again. So that kind of mechanism, we call it as metameric segmentation. Just remember. Okay. So what is meaning of metameric segmentation? In organisms like earthworm, the body is divided into different compartments, different segments, with a serial repetition of some organs. For suppose I told you here, there is an excretory organ, which we call it as the nephridia. So this nephridia is repeated several times in the segment. Okay, that means it is present somewhere here and it's also repeated somewhere here again. So that kind of scenario, we call it as the metameric segmentation. Understood? What is meaning of metameric segmentation?
Yeah, sir.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Next one, notochord is present or not. And remember this notochord, it is also a rod-like structure, which is mesodermically origin. This is very important. Notochord is mesodermically origin. It is a rod-like structure. It is present on the dorsal side of an organism during embryonic development. That means when you take the fetus, it is present on the dorsal side. What is meaning of dorsal side? Front or back?
Front.
See, ventral is front. That means your chest region is called as the ventral region, where your heart is present, lungs are present, your breastbone is present. On the back side, you are called as the dorsal. Okay, so just remember, front is ventral, back is dorsal. Okay, here you can see here, this is the ventral, where your heart, chest region is present. This is the dorsal. Notochord is always be on the dorsal side. Okay, in the embryonic stage. You can see here, this is ventral, the inner body part, and this is dorsal. This is the front region is anterior, the back is, the last is the posterior. So you can see here, this is the back of the man, which is containing the vertebral column. So whatever the notochord is there, that notochord is protected with a bony structures. So that's called as the vertebral column. Understood?
Yes, sir.
And the note, based on these notochords, animals were classified into two types: chordates, non-chordates. Chordates are animals with notochord. Non-chordates are animal without notochord. Okay, these organisms do not have any notochord at all. There is no notochord, but these organisms, they have the notochord. Okay, at least at some point in the lifetime. See, in some organisms, it is present throughout the life. In some organisms, it is only present in the embryonic stage, only at the embryonic stage. But later, when the baby born, it was absent. So those are also considered as chordates. Whereas non-chordates, animals, they do not have notochord at all, even in embryonic stage. Okay. Example like sponges and jellyfish. So finally, there are different phylum in the animal kingdom. So Porifera, Coelentra, Ctenophora, Platyhelminthes, Aschelminthes, Annelida, Arthropoda, Mollusca, Echinodermata, Hemichordata, finally Chordata. You need to remember this order. You can also use this Mnemonic, Prince Charles, children play all Anglo-American music, eating hot cakes. Instead of remembering this, you can just by heart this order. Say 5 times every day for next 2 or 3 days, you will be remembered. Porphyra, Coelentra, Tinophyra, Platyhelminthes, Aschelminthes, like that. And we'll be seeing. Okay. So first of all, am I audible?
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay. So animals were classified into two, whether they are cellular or tissue organ system. All those animals which are cellular level is porifera, which is asymmetrical. That means the body cannot be divided into two equal halves. And then animals like tissue organ system, they show the symmetry, but it could be the radial symmetry or bilateral symmetry. Actually, the primitive organism shows the radial symmetry. So Coelentra, Tinophyra. But advanced organisms will show the bilateral. That is Platyhelminthes, Aschelminthes. As you go further advancement, here the chordate is the ultimate advancement. Okay. So when you see the bilateral, again the question is, do they have the body cavity? Or do they have a false body cavity where it is not lined up completely with a mesoderm? Or do they have the complete body cavity? So coelomates. Acoelomates is Platyhelminthes, pseudocoelomates is Aschelminthes, coelomates Annelida, Arthropoda, Mollusca, Echinotomata. That means from Annelida, the next is all coelomates. Aschelminthes is the only organism which is tissue organ system level bilateral with a false coelom. Sometimes the questions will be the organism is having coelom, it is having bilateral, and they also give something else. Or else the questions will be the organism is pseudocoelom and it is having the bilateral symmetry. So from that you can conclude that it comes under the Aschelminthes phylum. Okay. Or you can say the organ is having the radial symmetry. Then you can say it's a Coelentrata or Tinophyra. So the questions can ask anyway. As I talk more in detail, you can also see the further things. But this is a very basic one. Is that clear?
Yes, sir. Understood.
Yes, sir.
So, 1 second, guys.